Did you know that the episode you are about to listen to is available on YouTube as a full multi-camera experience? Search for the Murder Police Podcast channel on YouTube. Subscribe and see what you have been missing.
I always bring them a little bottle of water. Hey, you need something to drink? Get that out of the way. Here's your bottle of water. Now I've given you something. Now you need to give me something.
Yeah. I always said if we had a 24-hour Burger King next to headquarters, our confession rate would probably increase pretty good. There's something to that, you walk in the room, maybe they just got tackled by patrol, maybe, they rode in the back of that car and everything, and you walk in and you're like, are you hungry? Do you need something to drink?
Liar, liar, pants on fire. Body language and statement analysis with Eddie Pearson. Part 2 of 4.
Warning. The podcast you're about to listen to may contain graphic descriptions of violent assaults, murder, and adult language. Listener discretion is advised.
And what I want to achieve is that you and I have a positive conversation at the end. When we're done, it's a positive conversation. Do you think that's fair? They're like, yes, sir. That's, yeah. Then I just start. So that's how I usually start them. And then as I'm asking these questions, then again, I'm looking at the body language and the statement analysis and how they're asking questions. Let's talk about feet. The feet are the most honest part of the body. Do you know why?
No.
Because it's the furthest portion from the limbic portion of your brain. Nobody talks about feet.
No.
Okay? I tell my single friends, I say, if you ever go to a bar and you want to try to pick up on a girl and she's sitting at a bar and she has her feet wrapped around the bar stool, just keep walking. She's either meeting somebody, she's not interested in you. So she takes her legs and those feet and wraps around that bar stool. Just keep walking. I said, now, just keep walking.
I think you just invented your own TikTok channel.
There you go.
Go ahead.
Eddie, why? Why wrapping it? What's that mean?
Because it's a security thing. She's waiting for somebody. She's not interested. She's not open. All right? I said, if someone is sitting at a bar stool and they're turned towards you and their toes are pointing towards you or out towards the open portion of the bar, that's like an invitation to, hi, come talk to me. I said, but if they're turned around, their feet are under the bar stool, they're wrapped around, just keep walking. Right?
Interesting.
And it's a security thing. Right? They do the same thing when they come into the polygraph room. There's a polygraph chair sitting there. I'll say, just have a seat right there, and I'll have a chair on wheels, and I'll kind of pull it up, and you'll see them take those feet and wrap them right up around those polygraph legs.
Does that happen as you move in?
Sometimes it does, or sometimes it does. As soon as they sit down, they wrap their feet around.
Yeah, I was going to say, because that was the thing I always watched as far as when you start to close that proximity, and you'll probably get there, is how that was. I think me and Billy had a guy almost back through the wall one day, and we were slowly moving toward him, and he just, I mean, it's a good thing the wall was solid. I mean, I've never seen my jump like that, like he got jolted with 5,000 votes, but you'll probably get there. But I was asking because it was neat to, if you're paying attention, to watch those things as you get.
Their chair that they're sitting in, if at all possible, needs to be affixed to the wall, to the floor, so it can't move. Yeah. Your chair needs to have wheels on it, so you can move around. If you put them in a chair that has wheels on it, you're going to be going all around. You're going to be like a roller coaster going all around that room.
And police departments work with what they've got. I've seen that, and I think I've commented before, is again, you'd see, and it's nothing on that because they have to work with what they've got. But I've walked through the room and somebody's doing an interview and they're in an office chair and that's what's going on, or they're swiveling and they're blowing that energy out while they turn.
It throws all that body language off because you want them in a chair that's kind of uncomfortable and is affixed to the floor or the wall or something. Because when they move, there's a thing called an anchor point movement. If you move 2 anchor points at one time, like whatever, like you're sitting there and your feet and your legs and your back and your arms, it's all making contact with something. So if I ask you a question and you move 2 anchor points at one time, I need to take note of that because that's a body language cue that didn't happen until I asked you that question. So when you're looking at body language, you want to look at gestures. Like me scratching my nose, that's a gesture. So you want to take 2 gestures as one cluster. So you want to look at for clusters. because one of something is nothing. But if I scratch my nose and look down when you ask me a question, that's a cluster. So what was my question that made you respond that way? Well, I did that when you asked me about stealing the watch. So let's go back and talk about stealing that watch, because that's the only time I seen that gesture or that cluster when I asked you about the watch. I didn't see it any other time. So now let me go back and talk about this watch. So you have to take notes of those. That's the things you got to keep kind of in your brain as you're going along, plus all the next questions you're going to ask.
It brings up a good point that I think has come up before a little bit, maybe, but taking notes. Because again, and this is not being overly critical because you can't help but notice, but you'll watch an interview and most of the eyes are this, not to mention there's pauses, there's, pardon me while I write this and everything, that coming up with some way of acknowledging that but not losing that focus, because you won't see all of that if you're buried inside of a piece of paper.
I try not to take notes.
Yep.
During now an interview, I'll take notes. Interrogation, I don't take notes. And I always, like I said, always have the detectives watching me do it, and I have them take notes for me. Because if I'm in an interrogation and you say something and I write it down, and then first thing I'm going to think of, well, maybe I shouldn't have said that because he wrote that down. Or, oops, I think that might have been important because he wrote that down. Yeah. So I don't take notes. Personally, myself, I don't take notes during an interrogation because I know as soon as I write something down that they said, that's going to be an issue.
And we can have a poker face too.
Exactly.
That they don't have to be trained in this, but you're right. Is one, we're writing it, and then we are probably going to express some body language while we're writing it. Like if it's good, you might kind of, oh shit, kind of that.
Scribble it real
you're
quick.
Screwed. Yeah, kind of.
Don't roll your eyes. Yeah, right.
What's he writing death penalty for?
So I don't take notes. That's just me. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I just don't do it.
Well, we have the gift of recording now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have that, which is remarkable in that you have
You
an
can go back
indelible.
and watch and look for the clusters in case you did look down.
I mean,
Exactly.
thank God for audio and video recording because that gets around all the concerns of Miranda. That again, like you talked about the statements you make, is that it's really hard to suppress something if we have our I's dotted and T's crossed.
And the hard thing for us as investigators and all the other investigators, we have to know this, all these details on the fly, because this may be the only time we get a chance to talk to this person.
Absolutely.
So sometimes we don't have the luxury of going back and watching the video 5 or 6 hours and then interviewing the person again.
Right.
Sometimes we don't have that.
No.
So a lot of times, this stuff, you really kind of have to have it down cold because this may be the only opportunity you have to talk to this one person, especially if they use those magic words, I want my lawyer, then you're done.
That's it.
Right?
It stops.
So, so a lot of this stuff, and the reason it's very difficult, it is, at least for me, is that you have to keep all this stuff in your brain because you can't, hold on, now, let me look at my notes. I mean, you can't do that. So you got to continue on. So a lot of these body language cues and statement analysis cues, you got to kind of really, really, really practice this stuff and in order to be proficient at it, because when you're doing these interviews, you have to do it live and in person, and you don't get a chance to go back. Now, I always go back 99% of the time. I'll go back and I'll watch my own interviews, and I hate doing it because I look stupid doing it. I'm like, man, I shouldn't have said that, or that would have been a perfect time to ask this question then.
Oh yeah.
But at least you're learning from it for next time.
But I'm always self-critical, right? But I always do it, and I hate doing it, but I make myself do it because, I've caught myself rolling my eyes. I'm like, yeah, right. I can't believe we're going through this again. And you can't, like you said, they're watching your body language as much as you're watching theirs. Right?
100%.
So you really gotta have this stuff down, and you can use this body language. You can use it when you buy a car, book a vacation, ask your children, how was school today? I mean, you can use it anytime, all the time. Go to a restaurant, the waiter comes up and says, what do you recommend? And watch his body language. You're looking at, I can't decide, what do you recommend? And watch his body language or her body language and see what the server does. Mm-hmm. I do it all the time.
What do they typically do?
They typically try to push what the chef told them to push.
Right.
We need to push chicken tonight. Okay, so the chicken is going to be, but you can usually tell. I never give them, well, how's the lasagna? I never say that because I already know the answer to that question. Right? Server's not going to say lasagna's horrible. Don't eat it.
I've only had that a couple of times.
I've never had anybody say that to me.
Like I'll give them an A or B,
Right.
and they'll be like, "Don't get those."
Yeah.
But that's rude.
I've never had anybody do that to me. But I would say, hey, what do you recommend? What's good? However you want, and just watch what they do.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I do it all the time.
We'll have to try that. We'll have to purposely go through. Another thing that's neat in listening to you talk is, again, for the people that haven't been around this, is the complexity and the weight when you go in that room. I think a lot of people think that you go in that room and it's a conversation. And of course, people from the peanut gallery, which is natural, they'd say, I'd ask this, why didn't I ask that? But if you start with the complexities of the legal system and the structure that we have to have in place to understand where we're at when we go in, then you go with the idea that, like you said, because I was the same way, especially if I was tired, absent the body language, focusing on what the hell they're saying to not let that slip so you don't miss that question. Because you will go back later, you'll be looking at your transcript and you're like, that was a jump point. That was it. And even if you did okay, but we're critical of ourselves, because I'm remembering I'm living in interviews right now that went on for a long time with a lot of complex stories.
Oh, yeah.
One of them from Lexington to Nicholasville to Marion County. And I remember you're bringing that back alive again about how you're trying to follow this story because in that story are the places where you're going to get the jam. So I think that's good for people to hear. This isn't going in and just speaking with somebody. It's a lot of work. And it takes training.
There's a lot of science behind it. When you really break that down, there is a ton of science behind this. And I've tried to break it down as much as I can to make it as simple for me as I can. Because like I said earlier, I like to keep things kind of monkey simple. But there's just so much going on in your brain. Because if you're asking a person about an incident and they want to be deceptive, they're going to make it as muddy as they possibly can.
Yes.
They want to give you so much untruthful information to try to confuse you or to try to throw you off the trail or to try to protect someone else from something that happened. So, it's depending on, what the situation is. Most people, when they tell you a story, if they're telling you the truth, they don't take their honesty for granted. Going to say, okay, David, this is what happened. Blah, 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 blah. That's it. Now, believe me, don't believe me, I don't care, but that's the truth. That's what happened.
Right.
So they will they will convey the information to you. People that are being dishonest or trying to omit information will try to convince you they're not the kind of person that would do that. So when you're talking about stealing a watch from a retail store and you're asking that question, I work 60 hours a week. I make $190,000 a year. I have 5 Rolexes. Why would I steal that cheap Timex watch? Well, that's all well and good, but you never answered my question. Mm-hmm. Did you steal the watch? And you see it all the time. And people would do that. So a lot of times when people are telling, and that's all part of their body language as they're telling you this story, you're trying to listen to that and take in all this body language as they're doing that. So a lot of times people will do that. I've talked to people that, some of the interviews I do, not a lot, but some of them I do, have to do with child sexual abuse. And when you're talking to a 55-year-old grandfather that's accused of having sexual intercourse with his 9-year-old granddaughter, if they say, that's disgusting, I would never do that. I'm not the kind of person that would do this. I'm not the kind of person that would do that. And then they start laying out all these reasons why they wouldn't do something like that.
I have grandchildren.
I have grandchildren. I love my
the entire time you're saying that's the scenario. I've got grandchildren. Why would I ever do that?
Yeah, I love my grandchildren. Why would I? And I'm thinking, we got a problem here because you never told me you didn't do it.
And let me ask you this. Did you see what I saw when they would do that, where the drama level would increase, almost like they're looking for an Emmy?
Absolutely.
And it would be more like really in there. And I'm like, man, you should have been on Broadway. Yeah. But it's at that. And the other thing I used to see, and you'll probably get there too, but is when they're doing that is when they'll hang on and overly describe minuscule details that have no apparent value, but they're provable. Like if they know there's something in that story that if you went back and looked at video, you'd see, but it means nothing to the case.
Exactly.
And I see that unfortunately in the true crime genre, is that when somebody is sometimes true crime people, I hate to say this, they'll start to buy a load of garbage, but they haven't been around it. And usually what they're paying attention to is they start to assemble all these disconnected things, and they believe it becomes circumstantial when they don't know that these are the results of somebody who's masterfully deflected you.
Oh yeah, I call it smoke screening.
There we go.
That's what I call it.
That's a good name for
I
it.
call it smoke screening. Because I was interviewing a lady who stole some money she was a bank teller, and she stole money from the bank, a large amount of money from the bank. And I was asking her about how the deposits, when someone comes in to make a deposit, how does that work? Run me through that. She said, okay. So she starts telling me how a deposit's made. But then she told me how the money got transferred from the feds to the bank. And she starts telling me all this other information, all this other details that has nothing to do with her stealing the money. And I just call it smoke screening. And a lot of times people will do that, and you have to bring them back to, okay, that's all well and good, but that's not what we're talking about. What I'm talking about is you stealing this money from your employer. And so you constantly have to bring them back to that. But people that are honest, you don't really have to do that.
Yeah.
And I can usually tell pretty quickly after talking to somebody if what they're telling me is true or not. But what I do is I also let them talk about all that peripheral information, because that's verifiable information that I may need.
Sure.
If you're doing a homicide and the guy says, I wasn't here, me and my girl were in Gatlinburg.
That's gold.
Okay. How did you get to Gatlinburg? Well, we drove her car. Okay. And so now they got to eat. They got to get somewhere to stay. They got to put gas in it. Right. So now I'm going to go look for food receipts. I'm going to look for hotel receipts, cabin receipts. I can get all that verifiable information. So when they're giving me all this other information, I'm taking note of it, and then I'm going to tell the detectives, well, he said he left on this date, and they were in Gatlinburg when the homicide occurred. Let's find out where they got gas. Let's look at the gas card. Let's look at the mileage on her car.
Again, that's that stuff, Eddie, when you're tired, you better be paying attention.
Because you'll miss it.
That's it.
And I have missed it.
That's it.
I have missed it. I have done it. I've missed it. And I did an interview one time, and it was actually on a theft. And I talked to this guy for 2 hours, and I never asked him that he stole the money. Never ask him. I ask him every question in the world, but never ask him, did you steal the money? Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I need to go to the bathroom, right? So we took a break, and the detective says, hey, you never asked him, did he steal the money? And I'm like, I ask him every other question. But and like you were saying, there's just so much to remember. And sometimes you miss it. And so I say, well, that's why I want my detectives to say, watch me do this, because I am by no means perfect. Mm-hmm. And I miss stuff all the time. But the way I look at it, and like you was talking about an ego thing, it doesn't matter to me if the person is lying and we get him to confess. I don't care if I get him to confess, if Wendy gets him to confess, if you get, it doesn't matter.
Right.
The guy came in, we spoke with him. These are the results of the interview interrogation, and now we can move forward with the case, whatever it may be. I've had people look at me and say, well, if I can't get him to confess, nobody can. I'm like, really?
Yeah, no, that chemistry. And we were big on that too, and I think here we go, you have to have humility and check yourself, because I think, and the group of people I work with, is one of the things that I loved about it is if one of us sat down and that chemistry wasn't clicking, like you could tell, I don't like you, boom, we were gone.
Oh, yeah.
And we'd go out and we'd say, hey, Billy, can you run in on this one? Whatever it was, because it was like, instead of going there and trying to push the chemistry, if they didn't like you at all, maybe I wore glasses, I was short, or whatever it was, boom, we switched out. And not every, but there again, people think that I'm a master.
I've done polygraphs, and I've sat there, and the guy fails the polygraph, or girl, whoever, fails the polygraph, and I've talked to him for 2 hours, can't get anything out of him. Another examiner come in, sit down, talk to him for 15 minutes, got a confession.
Go. That's it.
So then I'll go back, and why did you tell him that? Well, he looks like he reminds me of my grandfather. Or, my brother, and he knows my brother because they went to high school together.
There we go.
I mean, and I'm like, okay.
That's it.
I mean, I have great, we got the confession. We can move forward. We can,
Well, can I throw something in too? Because we're talking about confessions and everything. Is I think another thing that you've experienced a lot, and we've all experienced too, is when you actually are able to exonerate and remove somebody from a case. Exactly. I want to make sure we put that balance in, because it's about the truth, and the truth takes you where it's going to go and everything. But the other thing too is that if we do this correctly, if somebody's not involved, we can articulate a very good, clear record. And then you're back to that thing where you're helping that person. And And that's so the truth is what we're out for. But I will say too that in the true crime world, you'll hear people, I've seen it before, that the only reason the cops put people in a room is to make them confess. And I'm like, well, sort of. But the reality of it is we're also not going to go in that room and waste our time just fishing. Does that make sense?
Right, exactly.
So by the time we're sitting down with people, we feel pretty strongly about it.
Right.
But I wanted to throw in there too that
Exactly.
that there's a neat feeling in taking somebody off the hook and removing them solidly as a suspect. That's pretty cool.
The way I approach it is this, and not everybody does this, but this is how I do it. My job as a polygraph examiner is to get as much information as I can from this person.
Right.
Truthful information, deceptive information. I want to get as much as I can. If it's deceptive information that they've provided, I want to give them an opportunity to correct it, because we don't remember everything in detail in our entire life. Like, what's the sixth word of the Star Spangled Banner? You got to think about that. If you say, I don't know, and then 20 minutes later you say, oh, it's bye.
Yeah.
Okay, well, great. I want to get as much information as I can, all right, and give this person every opportunity that I can to fix whatever issue they're looking at. If they decide to do that, wonderful, I will help them. If they decide not to do that, wonderful. I've done everything I can do to help them.
Yeah.
It's on them.
Yeah.
All right. So, like you said, I'm not always in there looking for a confession. But if you failed a polygraph test, there is a reason you failed it.
Yeah.
And we need to find out what that reason is. And so if you can say, well, the reason I failed the polygraph test is because I didn't tell you about this. Okay, let's talk about that. Mm-hmm. Maybe I didn't ask you a question about it because I don't know what I don't know.
Right.
So if someone comes in and they are accused of stealing a watch and they fail a polygraph test because they stole a watch from another retail store, not the one we're talking about, and it was a different watch, if I don't know about that, I can't talk about it. So you say, well, I didn't steal that watch from that store. Oh, really? That store? Well, where else have you stole a watch from? Because I did a test one time on a burglary, and a guy was accused of breaking into his neighbor's home and stealing his flat screen TV and taking it to a pawn shop and pawning it. And so during my interview, the guy says, I've stolen a lot of stuff in my life, but I did not break into my neighbor's house and steal his TV. He's just trying to set me up. And I said, well, listen, a polygraph exam doesn't only detect deception, it detects the concealment of information. So if you've stolen stuff from somewhere else and we don't talk about that, that can cause you to have a reaction on this test because you're not telling me 100% of the truth 100% of the time. The guy admitted to 6 other burglaries that we never knew about.
Oh, wow. That's a score.
So, yeah.
Did he really not steal the TV?
No, he didn't steal it. No. And he took his top polygraph test and passed it.
Yeah.
Because I was asking him specifically about that one. Like David said, we don't go fishing. If you didn't do this, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do this? But if they make a statement that says, well, I've stole some stuff, but I didn't steal nothing from that house. Okay, well, what else have we stolen? Let's talk about that. That way you're not thinking about it during the test. That way it's not an issue.
There we go.
Oh, okay. Well, I've done this and I've done that and I've done this, but I was never, okay. I'm only worried about this house and this TV. I don't care about any of that other stuff after I get that information.
Right.
Well, he admitted to 6 other burglaries that the police didn't even know about.
Wow.
So the way I look at it, my job is to get as much information as I can. There you go. There's your information, detective, and detect. Do what you need to do, Because like I tell them, I'm a civilian. I can't charge you. I'm not going to arrest you. I'm just here to help you.
Yeah.
All I'm here to do. So,
that's a neat perspective.
Yeah. So that's kind of the way I look at it. And I take all that body language in there. And I've told people, I said, listen, and like you said, or you kind of BS them a little bit. I said, I know you're not telling me the truth just by how you're sitting in that chair. They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, honest people, they don't wrap their feet on, and I don't do this at the beginning. I always do it at the end.
Right.
Because I don't want to give them this information until I'm almost done. And I said, well, honest people don't wrap their feet around the chair. Honest people don't cross their arms and do this. Honest people, and I'll start talking about all this negative body language. I'll say, honest people sit like this, and I'll have them put your feet flat on the floor, turn your hands up, lean forward, and I'll have them sit like that. I said, that's how an honest person sits when they have a conversation. So did you steal that watch? I didn't know. I didn't understand. And they'll go right back to the negative body language that they have. And
that's what I was going to say. I knew that was going to be. I knew that would happen.
They go right back to it. Yeah. One of the most misunderstood body language cues is this: arms crossed. Everybody says, "Well, you're sitting in the room, you're talking to somebody, and your legs are crossed and your arms are crossed." That's a barrier. Could be, but it could be because I'm cold.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you got to kind of look at this stuff and why is this person's arms crossed? This whole time I'm having this conversation, why are their arms crossed? Are they cold? Are they comfortable sitting that way? Am I not asking the right questions? Because you start asking questions and you start building that rapport, you're going to see the center portion of their body open up. Mm-hmm. You'll see that. When you see that center portion of that body open up, the chair that you're sitting in that has wheels, you need to start to close that distance. Some of my interrogations, we are knees to knees. My knees is touching his knees or her knees, whatever it is. There was a research paper that was done at the University of Minnesota years ago, and it came out and says that if you're physically touching someone, it's much harder for them to lie to you. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times if people are sitting in the polygraph chair and they got their hands on their arms, on the arms of the chairs, I'll reach out and just touch the back of their hand and say, listen, I'm here to help. Everything's going to be okay. We all make mistakes. Kind of pet them on their hand or maybe touch them on their elbow. That's the only place I'll ever touch anybody. Mm-hmm. But so that, they say that touching someone is much harder for them to be deceptive while you're touching them. So a lot of times when I start closing that distance, and when I start doing that, I always make sure my chair is lower than their chair because I don't want to look down on them. I want to look up at them. And I always lower my voice and I start talking much slower. There's a book out there called Never Split the Difference. A gentleman by the name of Chris Voss wrote this book. It's an amazing book. If you get a chance to read it, I highly recommend it. But he uses what he calls his late night FM DJ voice. It gets real low. And you know who Barry White is?
I was going to say
singer,
it's
Barry
like
White.
Barry White.
That's the Barry White voice you want to use.
Yeah.
When you want someone to confess, you kind of go into your Barry White voice. Mm-hmm. And you talk nice and slow, kind of deep. Don't mock him, but just slow down. Talk, I know this is a mistake. This is not anything you intentionally did.
Something more maternal than driven. There we go again, where people, I think they really think you just yell at people till they break, that quote unquote break. But to get inside that social creature they are.
I try to avoid using the term I understand. I try not to say that because the word I is a neuroreceptor interrupter. You're changing the context of the conversation from the person you're interviewing to you. Like some of the real estate agents that I teach, I always say, don't say, I understand why you're selling your house. Let's say you have a lady that's going through a divorce, and part of the divorce is that she has to sell her home. So a real estate agent may say, I understand what you're going through. Well, my very first question is, if I hear that, is, how many divorces have you been through? Well, I've never been divorced. Now, how can you understand what I'm going through? Go. Or if you're talking to a 52-year-old man that's accused of having sex with his granddaughter, you say, I understand. When were you accused?
You've done it too.
Yeah, when were you accused? Oh, I've never been accused. So I get away from that. Right. Okay? So I try not to say I understand because I want to avoid that. Anytime I start an interview and interrogation, I always do what's called an accusation audit. I always say something to the effect, listen, I understand you're busy. This is not a good time for you to come sit down and talk to me. This is going to be painful. We're going to talk about some very, very embarrassing things. We're going to be adults about it. We're going to be professional, or we're going to move on. Taking a polygraph test sucks. This is a horrible thing you have to go through. And I always talk about all the negative aspects of talking and having a conversation with someone about whatever we're going to talk about. The reason I do that is because they can't come back later on and throw it up in my face and use it as a defense because I've already talked about it.
There we go.
Yeah. I always get it out in the open. So I always do that right from the get-go. And so we always talk about that and get that going. But one of the main things is that once I get that cognitive load increased in their brain, I want to keep it increased. I don't want to take a break and let it come back down, let them reset, let them go smoke a cigarette, short of them going to the bathroom on themselves, we'll stay in there and we'll continue to talk.
Gotcha. I
always bring them a little bottle of water. You need something to drink? Yeah. Get that out of the way. Here's your bottle of water. Now I've given you something. Now you need to give me something.
Yeah. I always said if we had a 24-hour Burger King next to headquarters, our confession rate would probably increase pretty good. There's something to that you walk in the room, maybe they just got tackled by patrol, maybe they rode in the back of that car and everything, and you walk in and you're like, are you hungry? Do you need something to drink? And I'm telling you, I think I'm with you on that. That's a human thing of doing that. So that's a big deal.
I tell everybody when they come in, I say, listen, while you and I are together, if you need anything, you need to take a break, you need a glass of water, all right? You want something, you let me know, I will get it for you.
There we go, provide. Talking about that cognitive load, I think that's why I hit on that minuscule smoke screen is that what I saw is that if they ran too hard, they're reducing that load that way.
Exactly.
And they get a lot of comfort because they're telling really solid truths in that moment.
Because they'll shut down on
That's
you.
it. That's it. So
When
as soon as you said that about the cognitive load, I was like, you could feel that they were getting more comfortable from that. And I think that's why it's important to bring them in. But providing is a big deal.
What do you say instead of I understand?
I don't say anything.
You just say nothing.
Yeah, I don't say anything. Just let it go. There's a technique out there called elicitation.
Hey, you know there's more to the story, so go download the next episode like the true crime fan that you are.
The Murder Police podcast is hosted by Wendy and David Lyons and was created to honor the lives of crime victims, so their names are never forgotten. It is produced, recorded, and edited by David Lyons. The Murder Police podcast can be found on your favorite Apple or Android podcast platform, as well as at murderpolicepodcast.com, where you will find show notes, transcripts, information about our presenters, and a link to the official Murder Police Podcast merch store, where you can purchase a huge variety of Murder Police Podcast swag. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, which is closed caption for those that are hearing impaired. Just search for the Murder Police Podcast and you will find us. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe for more and give us 5 stars and a written review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcasts. Make sure you set your player to automatically download new episodes so you get the new ones as soon as they drop. And please tell your friends. Lock it down, Judy.